Living next door to someone doesn't mean you know their story. When I discovered my wealthy neighbor's secret life as a waitress, I learned that first impressions can hide the most astounding truths. Living next door to Veronica was like having a front row seat to a fashion show. My glamorous neighbor, with her designer wardrobe, luxury cars, and perfectly groomed dogs, always seemed untouchable, like someone who lived in her own world. Every morning, I watched from my kitchen window as she emerged from her sprawling colonial house in outfits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her two Yorkies trotted beside her, their rhinestone collars glinting in the sunlight. Must be nice, I muttered one morning, stirring my instant coffee while she climbed into her Mercedes SUV carrying a designer handbag. My own living room desperately needed new curtains, and here she was, probably heading to some fancy brunch. We'd exchange quick nods when we passed each other, but that was it. She wasn't the warmest person, either. She had this way of looking through people like we were just background characters in her life. Even her house and front yard totally made mine look like a dump, even though we were literally neighbors. Then came the incident that cemented her image as entitled and out of touch. In my eyes, at least, I was watering my sad attempt at a garden when I heard her voice slice through the peaceful morning. "This is completely unacceptable," she snapped at a delivery driver. "You're 2 hours late, and everything reeks." The young delivery guy was Tom, who I'd often seen around the area, hustling for those delivery apps to pay for school. The poor man shifted from foot to foot at Veronica's harshness. "I'm really sorry, ma'am. The traffic was terrible, and I don't want excuses," Veronica cut him off. I couldn't hear any more of her words because the garbage truck came roaring in and blocked my view. I waved hello to Charlie and Parker, the garbage guys, as they did their thing. By the time they left, Tom's car had driven off, but I saw Veronica shaking her head, like, ugh, people, these days, before going into her house. I shook my head, too, thinking, man, she's so out of touch. It's not even funny. The days passed in their usual routine. I walked my scruffy mutt, Buster, past her house every morning, while she drove off in her luxury car, probably to some fancy spa or charity luncheon. But recently, I saw something that shattered my perception. My daughter Lily and I were walking downtown, window shopping and sharing a pretzel, when we passed this cozy little café with exposed brick walls and plants in the windows. "Mommy! Mommy!" Lily squealed, tugging on my sleeve and pointing through the window. "It's Mrs. Veronica." I glanced inside and froze. A waitress in a blue and white uniform was carrying a tray of coffee cups. Her dark hair, loose and wavy. She looked exactly like Veronica, down to the graceful way she moved. But it couldn't be her. "Don't be silly, honey," I said, pulling Lily along. "Why would Mrs. Veronica be working as a waitress? You've seen her house." My daughter and I finished our errands, but the image of my neighbor in that uniform nagged at me for days. It was like seeing a unicorn in my backyard. I knew it couldn't be real, but I couldn't shake the image. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I saw Veronica leaving her house in a sharp business suit with a briefcase in hand as if heading to an office. Without thinking, I grabbed my car keys. This is crazy, I told myself, following her Mercedes at what I hoped was a discreet distance. I'm actually stalking my neighbor. We drove through the business district, past all the gleaming office buildings where I assumed she worked. "Yeah, see? The waitress must just be her doppelganger," I said, nodding at myself. But then Veronica turned right, toward the commercial district. My stomach did a flip-flop when she pulled into the cafe's small parking lot. I parked at the spot closest to the street and watched as she got out of her car. She reached into the back seat and pulled out her blue and white waitress's uniform. As if sensing my stare, her eyes suddenly met mine, and her jaw dropped. The color immediately drained from her face. "Oh boy," I whispered. Before I knew what I was doing, I was out of my car. Meanwhile, she closed her car door and walked toward me. "Sarah?" she asked, her voice slightly wavering. "What are you doing here?" I... I'm sorry," I stammered. "I followed you just now. My daughter and I... Well, we saw you last week working here, but I thought I was imagining things." Veronica looked away at the small café building before turning to me again. She looked down at her hands. "Are you surprised?" Uh, yeah, a little," I admitted. "I mean, you don't exactly seem like someone who needs to work as a waitress." She smiled sheepishly, but I thought I could see a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Come inside. I'll explain everything." The cafe was quiet, with only a few early morning customers. Veronica led me to a corner table and disappeared briefly, returning with 2 cups of coffee and fully dressed in her uniform now. "My mother worked here," she began as soon as she sat down. "For 15 years, she served coffee and eggs and dealt with grumpy customers, all to keep food on our table." I leaned forward, surprised by the revelation. I had assumed Veronica came from a rich family. After my father left, it was just Mom, my brother Michael, and me, Veronica continued. She worked double shifts here, saved every penny, helped me through college. She was incredible. "Was?" I asked softly. "She passed away when I was 25, Veronica said. "Cancer. It happened so fast." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Every year, on the anniversary of her death, I work here for a month. I take the same shifts she used to take. I also wear a uniform, like she did every day." "But why?" I asked. "Because I never want to forget where I came from," she replied. "I am who I am because of her. All my success is because of my mother. She only got to see a small glimpse of it at my graduation. She never got to see me climb the corporate ladder and become financially independent." I cringed inwardly, realizing how badly I had misjudged her, but she came from just as humble a background as me. "Working here, it helps me remember her, feel close to her again," she continued. I nodded. "That's beautiful. I never imagined—" I trailed off as a thought entered my mind. "Wait, the other day you yelled at Tom, the delivery driver. Why?" "Oh, I remember you were watering your garden," she nodded. "My mother taught me about respect and responsibility, especially when you're working." Unfortunately, Tom was over 2 hours later with my order and reeking of smoke. I scolded him for having a bad work ethic. Maybe I was too harsh, but my mother's standards had ingrained in me. "Wow," I said. "I have to say that I didn't expect this at all. I really misjudged you." "I see. You thought I was probably an entitled rich lady yelling at a poor boy while looking down my nose at everyone around me." She chuckled. "Honestly, yes," I admitted, shaking my head. "You're not the only person to judge me," Veronica assured me, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "It's easier to see the surface. The cars, the clothes, are a part of me." She gestured to her uniform. "But this is me too, and it's just as important. And unless this cafe closes, I'll keep doing it as long as I can." "Okay then, I guess I'll be coming more often this month," I added. "If that's all right?" "Of course," Veronica replied, standing and taking out her order pad. "What would you be having for breakfast today, ma'am?" I grinned at her. "Your mom would be proud," I chuckled. "I know," she nodded and took my order. Later, I told Lily she was right about seeing Veronica at the cafe. She was thrilled. We started going there every once in a while. After her mother's death anniversary passed, Veronica and I actually became friends. Even when she was dressed in her power suits, she'd always greet me with a warm smile. I'm not sure her Yorkies are too fond of Buster. They're a bit snooty. But hey, it's great to have a new friend.